So now we get to the research part of this thing. This is not research for an academic research essay. This is not an academic research essay. This is not an academic research essay. And if I say that 4,000 more times, maybe people will believe me, or maybe not. Anyway, it's not. But this is what real research is all about, is starting with a question and not an answer. For example, I'll tell you a story about my father, who was a young doctor, late 40s, and he started asking. He was studying trauma and trauma surgery, and the question he asked was, why can we fix a broken femur or a gunshot wound or an automobile accident injuries, but the patient still dies? Back in those days, they pumped people full of what's called plasma, which is sort of part of the blood that doesn't have any red blood cells in it. And it didn't work. I mean, it did, but it really was not as efficient as people wanted it to. So my dad said, well, why is this happening? That started his search. And he started looking at who's been doing research on it. What did they discover? Why didn't it work? Where else can I go? How can I set up another experiment to make it work? And lo and behold, he discovered what you now study in school about fluids and electrolytes. He changed the face of medicine. He introduced the world to emergency medicine and the use of saline and lactated ringer solution. And my dad was a big deal. Try living up to that. But he did something important. But it all started when he was in his early 20s with one question: why? And all the other questions cascaded from that. So never underestimate the power of a good question. So this is where you're going to start, right? You're going to start asking these journalist questions to start doing research for this article yourself. So we're going to talk about that for a second. We're going to look at another tool as well. And then I'm going to show you some examples from previous students just to see what they've got. So these journalist questions are who, what, when, where, why, and how. They're called journalist questions because they teach you that in Journalism School 101. To go out and report a story, you have to answer all these questions, and you put as many of them in the first paragraph as possible. That's how news stories are built. So start with the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your topic. And it goes kind of hand in hand with this little tool, which I use all the time, the KWL Plus. I do this in class when we actually have a class, but we don't have a class, so you have to do it yourself. But if, for example, you want to know something about, I don't know, Greta Thunberg from climate change. So you set your timer for 5 minutes and you write down everything you know about her in 5 minutes. Just don't stop. That's your K. And then when it goes off, you set it for another 5 minutes, and now you start generating questions about what you want to know. Right? This is your who, what, when, where, why, and how. It's want for 5 minutes. Then you stop. Then you do 10 or 15 minutes of initial research. You just go out and Google around like crazy, start bookmarking and copying and screen, capping and all that kind of stuff, and then stop at 15 minutes. And then set yourself another timer for 5 minutes to write down what you learned, okay, from all of this. Just basically summarize and what's in your brain now, just to get it out of the research area and onto a piece of paper for you. And then the most important part is the last thing. What do I still want to know? What am I missing? What is another who, what, when, where, why, how question that I can now continue to ask about this? And it will send you off on another research thing. So that's how research really goes. You and I, we all know that when you're actually doing research or you're curious about something, what's the first thing you do? Well, you do two things. One, you hit Google, and then you start following links, and sometimes you get lost and you can't get back. Right? Your browser doesn't only look back so far. But that's the first thing you do. Or you go to Wikipedia. And I have no problem with Wikipedia as a way to sort of get you sort of grounded on something. But then because wikis are publicly edited, you can't always count on the information in there to be accurate unless you're doing something in a real specific field like math. Those tend to all be correct because only mathematicians bother to go work on them. The mathematicians tell me this. The good thing about Wikipedia is it's got all these links and resources at the bottom of these articles that you can also use as part of your research. So don't discount Google or Wikipedia. With Google, go beyond the first 2 pages. Sometimes you may find the most interesting stuff on the 3rd page. That's fine. You're just gathering information at this point, okay? So another thing that you can use besides going out to do Google doing Google Scholar. If you're looking for something real professional for peer-reviewed articles, you can go to Google and under Tools, I think it's got Google Scholar. Go find Google Scholar, and it'll give you links to stuff that has whole articles that you can use. It's really a good tool. You don't have to go to the library to get some of this stuff. Just use Google Scholar. So, and you already know about doing interviews, so I'm not talk about those again. Surveys, you can look at original documents, diaries, and stuff that people have made, videos that they created from something that was actually happening to them. So in that mode, with that said, I want to show you some examples from some of my previous students. It's down here at the bottom. Okay, not all these are great, but they're interesting, the approaches that they took. This one was his thing on COVID. And the reason I put this one up here is because this is sort of your classic New York Times subhead. Right? So this is kind of what he was going for, was the Times or the Washington Post or some journal like that. But he starts off with his own story. It's 12 in the afternoon. I wipe the sleep out of my eyes and get a bed. Going through the whole day, it feels the same as yesterday, the day before that, the day before that. Right? So he starts with a personal article. Remember how we're structuring articles. An engaging opening. There it is. It's a personal story. And now here's his nut graph. That vaccinating a large percent is the next step in ending the pandemic. Right? So he's got pictures. He's got some research. This is from last spring, so it's going to be out of date a little bit. More. So he's got lots of good images. There's President Biden getting vaccinated. Right? So that's how he handled it. So that was his. This one was interesting. I asked her where she would put this, and she said she thought maybe in a high school newspaper, because it's about colorism, which I learned a lot about this topic from reading what she did here. So she started out with, sort of an interesting, in-your-face kind of question, and then a really interesting quote. Never trust a man who finds beauty in every race but his own. It's pretty fascinating. So this is a very personal piece. It starts out very personal, and then here comes her nut graph, and then she goes on and does some research. And one of the interesting things she did with this one that I like is that she set it up in some really interesting ways in terms of formatting. She's got these great images, but then she's got this, and she's got these kind of interesting, subheads with the bullets, more pictures. She's got some other links in here. She ends up with another great quote. There's another great quote in here. It's just some wonderful stuff. So, and here's a link to some information that's in here. So this one was really interesting. She took a lot of time to do this. Miss Ann did one on school safety. She said this she would send out to parent magazines. That was her audience. And again, she starts with the bells ring. You can finally leave school and relax at home. He walked down to she's got some typos. Crowd trying to reach the exit. You hear a bang and students yelling. It's now a death wish. All right, so she starts off with an experience, and now she's got her nut graph. And what the interesting thing about what she did was she's also got links to videos from CNN and stuff. But what's really fascinating is that she created a survey, and she sent this survey out to people that she knows, and these are the results of her survey about school safety, and some quotes from her respondents. So she did and then she ends up with a tips and advice and call to action and stuff, and another video link to another site with information about it. Let's see. Brandon's on climate change, fairly common topic, but he's got this gorgeous picture, and it starts out with a great quote from Jane Goodall. And so his nut graph and his intro are all kind of the same paragraph. You can take a look at all his stuff. He's got some great images in here. He talks about a whole variety of things. Mary took she took a different approach to the same topic, because she focused on the ocean ecosystem. And again, she starts with another great quote. She talks about her own childhood in China, and how now she's got some really great science and wonderful imagery and charts and graphs. Okay? So that's how she approached it. I can't remember how she ended it. Oh yeah, she did, tips and advice, and then she did give me. She didn't quote all of these in there, but these are the things that she looked at to create her article. And this one's fun because she decided she wanted to get to her fellow City Tech students, so she created the City Tech Weekly Digest and wrote for City Tech students. And that because she's talking about a really interesting thing about social media platforms and racial intolerance about Muslims. And so she started with something personal, and then she's talking about, and you can tell she's going to talk about social media because she got all these images up here, these logos, these icons, right? So she's got some great quotes in here. And there's one more on here, which is Manisha's, and she also did this again. She said she wanted to go to like Brooklyn Parent or some of the parent magazines about teenagers, and this is some personal experience about, she's got kids, and she also did a survey, and so she reports the results of her survey as well. So that gives you some ideas about how people have approached this particular assignment, and I hope that helps. And so what you're going to be doing next is thinking about all this stuff, and then by Thursday on the Padlet Wall, create a post and talk about the topic you're going to write about. Okay, who your target audience is, that's really important, and it isn't me. This is not an academic research essay, and I know you're sick of me saying that, but I'm going to say it, and somebody's going to do it anyway because they just don't believe me. Where you think that might be published, like the students of mine did before. Feel free to comment on other people's posts because a lot of times people get really great advice or leads from other students. I had a student who was going to do one on homelessness, and one of the students, he put up the equivalent in-class version of a Padlet Wall. And one of the other students in the class had just come out of a shelter with her family. And she gave him the name of the shelter and contacted the man who ran it. And so this other student was able to go in and do interviews. And he did a great article that was a combination of research and little snippets of anonymous, change the names, interviews with people who were still at the shelter. And it would not have happened. It was one of the best essays I've ever gotten. And I've lost it years ago now, but it would not have happened if somebody had not left him a comment like that on his equivalent of a Padlet Wall. There's a great huge post-its that I slap on the wall when I'm having a face-to-face class. So that's what the wall is all about. It's so I can see it, and if I think you're going down the wrong path, I can stop you or give you some suggestions of my own, and then to suggest things and ask questions of each other. Okay? So, and here's the link to the Padlet Wall, which is empty right now. Okay, but there it is. And so that's it for this video, and we will move on from here.